My business partner betrayed me, so I took him to court and seized the entire company. I first met Alex at a co-working event in downtown Kiev, 2 years before we ever signed papers. He was delivering a talk about scalable APIs, and I admired his confidence, how effortlessly he turned complex code into engaging stories. Afterward, we lingered by the coffee station, bonding over late-night debugging and our shared frustration with bureaucracy in tech firms. We shook on a promise. One day, we'd build something of our own. 6 months later, that promise became CodePulse, our boutique analytics startup. We rented a tiny office above a dusty bakery, exchanging takeout samplers for brainstorming sessions that stretched into dawn. Alex handled client pitches and investor teasers, his charisma opening doors. I focused on the product roadmap and architecture, sketching UML diagrams on whiteboards that soon creaked under layers of color marker. We divvied up equity evenly. 50-50 seemed fair, a testament to our mutual trust. Launching the MVP felt like winning a gold medal. We celebrated by grabbing craft beers under neon lights, toasting to our future, the press features, the Series A, the office expansion. Our roles fit perfectly. Alex's flair for presentation balanced by my obsessive drive to optimize every endpoint. Together, we were unstoppable. As our user base grew, so did our ambitions. We moved to a glass-walled conference room with floor-to-ceiling views of the city. Alex pitched a new feature, real-time predictive dashboards, and I dove into the back-end work, relishing every schema migration and performance test. Days blurred into nights. Dinner was often a protein bar, and our dreams felt within arm's reach. In those early months, the word partner felt sacred, a bond sealed not just by contracts but by mutual respect and unspoken loyalty. I believed Alex had my back, just as I had his. Little did I know that the very foundation of our alliance would soon begin to crack, setting in motion a betrayal I could never have anticipated. As CodePulse clients multiplied from 5 to 50, subtle signs of trouble began to surface. It started with invoices sent late or not at all. I'd log into our accounting portal only to find missing entries or strange refunds. At first, I chalked it up to my own oversight. I was juggling product sprints and code reviews, after all. But then came the whispered calls from customers. We never received that payment confirmation. Or your email said this feature was live, but my dashboard is blank. One evening, I stayed late, poring over transaction logs. Every irregular entry carried Alex's digital signature, timestamps that fell in the early afternoon, precisely when I was knee-deep in push notifications or kernel patches. My chest tightened as I noticed a pattern. Client A's $5,000 invoice rerouted to a shell account. Client B's subscription fees split between 2 transfers. These weren't innocent mistakes, but calculated moves. I confronted Alex the next morning over lukewarm coffee. He leaned back, eyebrows raised as though disappointed in my paranoia. "Accounting glitch," he said, voice easy. "Must be a bug in the portal API. I'll fix it." His tone felt too rehearsed. No genuine apology. No concern for embarrassed customers. Just a promise I knew I couldn't trust. Over the next week, I found more breadcrumbs. Changes to our cap table without my approval, hidden clauses in investor agreements, and an anonymous email threatening to reveal our financials unless I handed over control. My sleep grew restless, haunted by half-seen figures moving funds like puppets. Yet I kept my voice calm in team stand-ups, masking the storm inside. That night, I sat at my desk under the halo of my monitor light, drafting an email to a forensic accountant. As I clicked send, I realized that the cracks in our partnership were deeper than I ever imagined, and the revenge I'd soon exact would require patience, precision, and unwavering resolve. 2 nights later, I found the smoking gun. I'd asked the forensic accountant to cross-reference our business bank statements with a freshly pulled audit trail. When a report landed in my inbox, I felt an electric jolt. Dozens of transactions labeled refund or consulting fee had funneled through an account registered under Alex's cousin's name. The amounts weren't trivial. Tens of thousands of dollars siphoned off while I was debugging late-night regression tests. My heart pounded as I opened our company's legal documents stored in the secure drive. There it was, a second operating agreement, and signed by me, granting Alex sole decision, making authority over financial disbursements. His forged signature on the bottom of the PDF was practically smudged, an amateurish flourish that betrayed both arrogance and haste. In that moment, everything crystallized. The late payments, the blank stares when I asked about missing funds, the anonymous threat, all pointed to a single betrayal. Alex wasn't just negligent. He'd been plotting to usurp our business from the start. I closed my laptop and stared at my reflection in the darkened screen. Gone was the eager entrepreneur who'd believed in friendship over contracts. In its place stood someone forced to choose between silent acceptance or decisive action. I ran through my next steps like code in my head. Secure all access, preserve evidence, notify my lawyer, and prepare for a legal showdown. A low, calm voice rose in my mind. He thinks he's a step ahead, but he's about to learn how meticulous I can be. With that, I shut off the office lights, locked the door behind me, and walked into the night, resolved to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The next morning, I arrived at the office before dawn, brewed a strong black coffee, and settled in for meticulous work. First on my list, securing all administrative privileges. I reset passwords for our server environments, our financial portal, and our document repository, locking myself in and Alex out until I had irrefutable proof. Then, I organized a clandestine folder labeled Evidence, where I imported every suspicious transaction report, the forged operating agreement, and annotated email threads. I tapped my lawyer, Elena, on a secure line. Her calm voice outlined the steps. File for a temporary restraining order on our joint assets, subpoena Alex's Shell account records, and take depositions from 2 trusted engineers who'd noticed late-night code merges on our finance module. I forwarded her the evidence bundle, and she confirmed receipt with precise efficiency. Back at my desk, I drafted a detailed timeline, dates, amounts, and actions, cross-referenced against server logs to prove that those code changes weren't system errors, but deliberate backdoors Alex had installed. I bookmarked lines of code where he'd inserted conditional flags rerouting payments. Each piece fit together like a forensic puzzle. I also reached out to our CTO, under strict confidentiality, explaining that I'd temporarily frozen Alex's access due to a serious internal investigation. She granted me provisional control over spending approvals, unaware of the full scope, and scheduled a discreet meeting with our finance team to audit the accounts. By late afternoon, I'd assembled witness statements from our head of operations and one late shift developer who'd seen Alex downloading CSVs from our invoice portal after hours. Their recollections, though hesitant, aligned perfectly with the financial discrepancies. As I compiled the final dossier for Elena, I felt a cold clarity. My patience had paid off. Every document, every testimony, every log entry, they would deliver justice through the courtroom, not through confrontation in the hallway. And when the legal gavel fell, Alex would learn that betrayal in business, like a bug in critical code, cannot hide forever. That evening, I requested a private meeting with Alex in our glass-walled conference room, the place where we'd once celebrated our first prototype launch. I slid the evidence dossier across the table, its jacket thick with bank statements, code snippets, and notarized affidavits. Alex's jaw tightened as he skimmed the pages, eyes flicking between numbers and lines of text that exposed his betrayal. "I know what you've done," I said, voice low but unwavering. "You've rerouted client funds, altered our agreement, and threatened me when I asked questions." Alex closed the dossier with a deliberate calm. "You're mistaken," he replied, pushing it back. "The transactions you're pointing to were part of a new compensation model I proposed to our investors. And the agreement you never signed because we were still negotiating terms." His denial was practiced, too smooth, too rehearsed. He even feigned hurt. I thought we were on the same side, but I'd anticipated his deflection. I tapped the screen, pulling up screenshots of his email to his cousin's account and time-stamped logs showing he'd edited the PDF at 2:17 a.m. He swore he'd been home asleep. I leaned back. "I've already verified every detail with our forensic team. The judge will see these logs and signatures. There won't be room for misunderstanding." He stared at me, shock morphing into desperation. For a fleeting moment, I saw the friend I once admired. But then his shoulders slumped, and he looked away. There was no apology, no admission, only a cold silence. I realized that any hope of an out-of-court resolution had evaporated. Standing, I said, "I'm filing suit tomorrow. I suggest you find your own counsel." Under the harsh glow of the conference lights, our partnership, once built on trust, lay irreparably shattered. And as I clicked my heels and walked out, I felt the weight of what was to come, a courtroom battle I was ready to win. Over the weekend, I met with Elena in her downtown Kiev office, the air thick with the scent of old leather and legal precedent. She laid out our strategy like a seasoned general. Pinpoint irrefutable proof, leverage civil injunctions to freeze Alex's assets, and orchestrate expert testimonies to dismantle his defense. We reviewed the evidence dossier line by line, each transaction trail, forged PDF, and witness affidavit, to ensure no loophole remained. Next, I identified 3 key witnesses. First was Katia from operations, who noticed Alex pulling CSV exports at odd hours. Her candid email became Exhibit A. Then there was Yuri, our backend developer, who remembered Alex embedding secret flags in the payment microservice. His annotated code excerpt would speak louder than any verbal claim. Finally, I secured a statement from our CFO, who confirmed that Alex's cousin's account had no legitimate business ties to CodePulse. Each witness agreed to a recorded deposition, and I coached them through what to expect in court, how to stay calm under cross-examination and avoid speculative statements. Back at our office, I assembled a chronology of events, from the first missing invoice to the forged operating agreement. I turned that timeline into a color-coded infographic for the judge, ensuring complex details would be immediately clear. Late that night, I emailed the compiled exhibits to Elena and watched my inbox until she confirmed receipt. As I powered down my laptop, I felt the weight of our preparations solidify into quiet confidence. Every document notarized, every code snippet logged. It all pointed toward one inevitable truth. The bench trial would uncover Alex's deception, and I would reclaim what was rightfully mine. The following week, I transformed my apartment into a war room. Whiteboards dotted every wall, plastered with mind maps of legal arguments and annotated evidence flowcharts. My laptop screen alternated between deposition transcripts and trial procedure guides. Each night, I rehearsed my testimony in the mirror, practicing calm clarity, steady eye contact, and succinct answers. I timed my opening statement to precisely 3 minutes, knowing brevity would underscore my control. Sleep became a luxury. I'd wake at 3 a.m., heart pounding, convinced I'd overlooked a crucial document or misremembered a date. I kept a stack of legal pads by the bed, scribbling bullet points and reminders whenever anxiety pulled me from rest. By dawn, I'd brew coffee 3 ways, black, espresso, and cold brew, just to sustain long days of preparation. Elena scheduled a mock hearing in her office, complete with a hired judge and opposing counsel to cross-examine me. As the questions flew about timelines, digital forensics, chain of custody, I discovered where my answers stumbled. After each round, Elena and I refined my responses, stripping away jargon and sharpening key facts. I learned to pivot gracefully. If I didn't know an answer, I'd admit it and redirect to the documented evidence. Meanwhile, I maintained a professional front at CodePulse. In daily stand-ups, I spoke with measured confidence about product milestones, concealing the storm brewing behind the scenes. Colleagues sensed my focus, but had no idea I was about to face my former friend in court. By the night before filing, I lay out my trial attire, a tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, and a navy and silver tie. I polished my shoes until they gleamed. As I tucked the evidence dossier into a leather briefcase, I felt a surge of solemn purpose. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just be seeking justice. I'd be reclaiming the dream Alex tried to steal. On the morning of the hearing, Elena and I arrived at the courthouse early. I filed the injunction papers and watched as the clerk stamped them filed. With Alex's assets now temporarily frozen, the balance had already begun to shift in my favor. But I wasn't content to rely solely on legal filings. I needed to ensure there was no path of escape for his defense. That afternoon, I quietly leaked a summarized version of the evidence timeline to a well-connected industry blogger under condition of anonymity. Within hours, a tech news article ran the story. CodePool's co-founder accused of financial misconduct, citing transactions, shell accounts, and a pending court injunction. The buzz rippled through our small community, putting public pressure on Alex and his backers. I chose the facts carefully to avoid defamation, just enough to make clear the seriousness of the suit without revealing every detail. Simultaneously, Elena sent a strategic letter to our primary investor syndicate, attaching redacted exhibits and a formal notice of the dispute. The investors, startled by the prospect of stalled growth, scheduled an emergency call. I presented our case as one of fiduciary duty. Either Alex's actions were corrected immediately, or CodePulse risked losing its credibility and their funding. Concerned for their own interests, they sided with me on a temporary board resolution granting me oversight of all financial decisions until the case concluded. By evening, I found Alex at our old office, packing his desk into cardboard boxes. His phone rang nonstop with calls from worried investors and clients demanding clarity. He didn't look up as I passed by, but I felt the weight of every frozen asset and board directive closing in on him. With the groundwork laid, legal, public, and financial, Alex would have nowhere left to hide when depositions began. And when that final gavel fell, there would be no doubt justice served and CodePulse restored to its rightful course. The morning of the trial, I arrived at the courthouse before sunrise, briefcase in hand and heart steady beneath a tailored suit. Elena guided me through security, her calm demeanor a steadying force. In the hush of the antechamber, I reviewed my notes one last time, timestamps, transaction logs, witness timelines, each page a testament to the truth I was about to tell. When the bailiff called our case, Alex and I stood at opposite tables. He offered a curt nod. I returned it with polite firmness. The judge entered, robes sweeping the floor, and took the bench. Elena whispered, "Remember, clarity and confidence," and I inhaled deeply, centering myself. The clerk swore us in. Then, the judge invited opening statements. Elena rose first for my side, concise, factual, and unwavering in outlining the conspiracy of diverted funds and forged agreements. Then Alex's attorney took the floor, smooth, rehearsed, painting the dispute as a simple miscommunication over accounting protocols. But I noticed the judge's measured frown at certain phrases, a subtle sign that not every point resonated. When it was my turn, I stood and looked directly at the bench. "Your Honor," I began, voice clear, "I'm here not just to reclaim stolen assets, but to uphold the integrity of every agreement we make in business." I walked the court through the timeline. Client payments rerouted at 2:17 a.m., the unsigned operating agreement, the shell account in a family member's name. Each fact supported by exhibits I laid before the clerk. As I concluded, I saw nods from Elena and the judge's clerk scribbling furiously. The courtroom felt charged, an arena where betrayal met accountability. Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat, hands clenched. In that moment, I understood that this was the turning point. Once the evidence spoke, there could be no retreat. The trial had truly begun. Update 1. Day 2 of the trial opened with me calling Katia to the stand. Dressed in a crisp suit, she stepped forward and affirmed how she noticed Alex exporting bulk CSV files at 11 p.m. on multiple evenings. Log sheet initially dismissed as routine maintenance. Elena guided her to the key exhibit, a side-by-side printout showing Katia's logged observation timestamps alongside the unauthorized transactions. The courtroom murmured as the judge peered over his glasses, then admitted the document into evidence. Next, I presented Yuri's testimony. He described discovering hidden flags in the payment's microservice, conditional statements that rerouted funds under a private test account. On a large screen, the jury saw annotated code excerpts where Alex had deftly obfuscated variable names. Yuri explained how he'd flagged unusual error handling behavior, but hesitated to escalate it without concrete proof. His voice wavered as he said, "I wish I'd spoken up sooner," underscoring the gravity of the engineer's silent doubt. Finally, Elena called our CFO, who outlined the trail of funds funneled through Alex's cousin's bank account, an account with no vendor contracts, no product deliveries, and no business justification. The CFO's clear ledger comparisons, client invoiced amount versus actual receipt, left no room for doubt. Each table row, each highlighted cell, brought the gravity of Alex's actions into stark relief. As the evidence unfolded, I watched Alex's defense team scramble to counter. But there was no plausible alternative explanation for such a coordinated scheme. When the judge granted a brief recess, whispers filled the courtroom. My meticulous preparation had turned suspicion into conviction, and momentum had decisively shifted in my favor. When the trial resumed, Alex's attorney attempted a bold gambit, painting the transactions as legitimate consulting fees for strategic advice. He called Alex to the stand, confident that his client's smooth demeanor would carry the day. But under Elena's sharp cross-examination, the cracks quickly appeared. She began by contrasting Alex's claimed consulting arrangements against the signed vendor contracts, none of which bore the cousin's name or any agreed-upon deliverables. Alex stammered as Elena pressed. "Elena, Mr. Ivanov, can you show us a single email or signed statement from your cousin outlining any consulting scope or fee schedule?" "Alex, I thought we had a verbal agreement. It's business at that scale." That admission proved fatal. Elena then produced emails Alex had inadvertently copied to his personal account, drafts where he discussed hiding the funds to avoid Sergei's oversight. His face drained as he recognized the damning language, and the judge paused the questioning to ensure Alex understood the gravity of revealing such intent. Next, the attorney tried to argue that the signature on the secondary operating agreement was a font error or software glitch. Elena smoothly countered by presenting metadata from the PDF, time-stamped edits, and user IDs, showing Alex's login at 2:17 a.m. the very night the forged document appeared in the system. Not a glitch, but a deliberate act. Throughout the cross-examination, the jury watched Alex's confident posture crumble into defeated slumps. When Elena finally rested her case, the courtroom buzzed with a clear realization. The defense had no credible explanation. Alex's narrative of misunderstanding lay in tatters, eclipsed by his own digital footprints and candid admissions. As the judge called for closing arguments, I felt a surge of clarity, not just satisfaction that truth had prevailed, but the certainty that justice would be served. Alex's final defense had unraveled before our eyes, leaving him nowhere left to hide. The courtroom fell into a heavy stillness as the judge reviewed his notes. The final arguments had been made. The evidence, meticulous, undeniable, had been laid bare. Alex sat rigid beside his attorney, hands clasped tightly, lips pressed into a thin line. I sat across from him, heart steady, Elena's quiet confidence beside me like armor. When the judge finally spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber with solemn finality. This court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, contractual fraud, and violation of fiduciary duty. Therefore, the court rules in favor of the plaintiff. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Effective immediately, the judge continued, "Suri Petrov shall assume full ownership of CodePulse. All disputed shares, assets, and intellectual property rights are to be transferred under his name. Mr. Ivanov is hereby ordered to repay the misappropriated funds in full, along with court costs." There was no applause, just silence, the kind that follows something irrevocable. Alex looked down, his shoulders slack with defeat. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The gavel struck once, final and sharp, and it was over. Outside, the air felt cleaner. Elena shook my hand firmly and said, "You didn't just win. You proved that betrayal can't erase truth." I nodded, overwhelmed not by triumph, but by a quiet, earned peace. Back at the office, my office, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking over the desks, the cables, the whiteboards still scrawled with our old sprint goals. I walked to the window, sunlight pouring over the skyline, and whispered aloud. We built this together, but only one of us honored it. The company was mine now, and for the first time since that first handshake 2 years ago, I finally felt like it truly belonged to me. Update 2. The first morning back in the office, as sole owner, felt surreal. The chairs were still pushed in neatly from the night before. The team's water cooler chatter paused briefly when I walked in, but not out of awkwardness. Out of curiosity, out of expectation, I nodded a quiet hello and went straight to the glass-walled conference room, the same room where I'd once handed Alex the evidence file. I opened my laptop, pulled up our roadmap, and deleted every initiative that bore his name. Then I began drafting something new, a leaner, cleaner, post-Alex version of CodePulse, one that prioritized transparency, fairness, and the product above all. In the weeks that followed, I called team meetings to clear the air. I didn't trash Alex or retell courtroom drama. I simply told the truth. The partnership is over. It was betrayal, but we survived, and now we rebuild. Some employees left. A few who had been loyal to Alex couldn't reconcile the shift, and I let them go with dignity. But most stayed, and slowly, they began to see the difference. I introduced anonymous team feedback loops, made financial records visible to department heads. And more than anything, I listened, but working late alone again brought back a different silence. The ghost of our early ambition still lingered in the walls. I'd find sticky notes in old notebooks with Alex's handwriting. Inside jokes, prototype sketches. It stung. Betrayal doesn't just leave anger, it leaves absence. Emptiness. Still, I kept showing up, kept refining the code, kept nurturing the culture we never quite had time to build. And one evening, while reviewing a pull request from a junior dev, I smiled at a well-written comment thread. Clear, thoughtful, team-oriented. We were changing. I was changing. The company no longer needed 2 founders. It needed one honest one. 3 months after the verdict, CodePulse had a new rhythm. Our product matured. Clients returned with trust, and a steady stream of new partnerships came in through referrals. On paper, everything looked better than ever. But I knew better than to measure success by numbers alone. What changed most wasn't the revenue curve or the user metrics. It was me. Before the betrayal, I believed loyalty was built on handshakes and shared dreams. Now, I knew better. Even the strongest bond could fracture without boundaries. I learned to separate friendship from business, heart from paper, trust from unchecked control. I hired a new legal advisor, not just to draft contracts, but to teach me how to protect what I built. Every founder agreement, every vendor clause, every future partnership would be reviewed, discussed, and signed with care. No more blind trust. No more assumptions. And I started mentoring 2 young founders in the same accelerator program Alex and I once graduated from. One of them reminded me of myself, full of ideas, notepads overflowing with optimism. He asked how I'd bounce back after everything. I told him the truth. You can survive being betrayed. You can even survive losing something you built. But you won't survive if you let it turn you bitter. You've got to learn, and then let it fuel you. He nodded, scribbling it down like it was gospel. I smiled, remembering a time when I would have done the same. I no longer looked at what Alex took. I focused on what I'd gained: clarity, independence, and a business that was mine not just in name, but in every line of code, every value in its foundation. And that was worth more than half of anything we'd once shared. The first anniversary of the court verdict came quietly. There was no celebration, no toast, no dramatic post on social media. Just me, alone in the office after hours, watching the city lights flicker across the windows as I deployed the latest product update. A simple bug fix, nothing flashy. But it worked. Smooth, stable, elegant. Just like the company had become. We had rebranded earlier that spring. CodePulse was now Lucentware, a name chosen by the team to represent light, clarity, and precision. The old logo, designed during late-night brainstorming sessions with Alex, was gone. So it was the culture of rushed decisions and private conversations. In its place stood a structure built on openness, accountability, and shared ownership. My team had grown, not in size but in strength. We weren't just coders and designers and analysts anymore. We were builders, survivors, believers. They no longer looked to me for revenge-fueled leadership. They looked to me for calm, steady vision. And I gave it to them, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I finally believed in it myself. Sometimes I still catch my reflection late at night. Same desk, same tired eyes, but different posture. Straighter, lighter. I no longer carry the bitterness of betrayal on my back. I carry the responsibility of having rebuilt something stronger. Alex? I haven't heard from him. Last I checked, his cousin's consulting agency had folded. His LinkedIn profile went dark months ago. I don't wish him well, but I no longer wish him harm either. He became part of my story, but he doesn't get to be the ending. Me, my team, a company that nearly died but didn't. A founder who almost gave up but didn't. And a future that finally belongs entirely to me.